Happy Friday, everyone. John Lorton here with a brand new episode of BrainScratch. Hope you've all had a nice week, and thank you so much for joining me here today. I'm really happy to finally be at a point where I can bring you into the fold a little bit on a case that I've been working very hard for the past few months on. This is the case of Christian Andreacchio, and this is a case that is being covered at the PI Experience at CrimeCon by Sheila Wysocki and her team. I've been working with Sheila for many, many months on this, just in terms of planning what's going to happen at the event. Danielle Hallen and I have also been recording videos specifically for the private Facebook group that is getting access to a ton of research about this particular case. So for today's BrainScratch, I want to share the basics of the case with you. I'm going to go a little bit into some of the details that I've received through the group. And this is basically a primer to another video that's going to come out next week on Danielle's channel. We're hoping it's going to be a live stream from the actual event on Thursday night. If for some reason we can't get good enough internet access there, we will record what's happening as we're meeting with people that are going through the exhibits and taking their information in, hearing about their thoughts and theories about what's going on with this case. And of course, we'll be sharing more information with you about this case at that point. So keep an eye out. Keep an eye on my Twitter. I'll also be posting to the Facebook or the YouTube community tab, or you can keep an eye on Danielle's channel. She's going to do the same thing. Check her community tab or check her Twitter as well. If we get this live stream going, I really want you guys to be there so you can join in on the conversation. But if not, just look for it probably released on the following day on Friday on Danielle's channel. So what is it about this case? Sheila really picks cases that are very, very tough. This is one of those cases. We've looked into several in the past where law enforcement almost makes an assumption that someone has ended their own life, and because of that, the investigation gets pulled in a very specific direction. This is another one of those cases. But how exactly did it arrive at CrimeCon? That was thanks to a family member back at CrimeCon 2018. And this is one of the things that's kind of special about CrimeCon is it's not just about social media people or podcasters being there for you to meet. There are also sometimes victims' families there that are trying to get the message out. There are authors that have worked on books about particular cases trying to share that information. And then, of course, you have, the Nancy Graces and Dateline staff and all kinds of stuff at that level too. But for certain family members that can't really get the attention of being booked on the stage, they'll show up at CrimeCon and sometimes just hand out letters. And that's kind of what happened at CrimeCon 2018. So this letter was handed out telling everyone about a Facebook page called Justice for Christian. Christian Shane Andreacchio was murdered February 26, 2014 at the age of 21. His death was immediately ruled a suicide, even though there was obvious inconsistencies with this determination of cause of death. Over the following 4 years, Christian's family has fought to have his case properly investigated. In February 2017, arrest warrants for Whitley Goodman, that is Christian's girlfriend at the time, and Dylan Swearingen, that is Christian's friend at the time, were issued for murder by the Meridian Police Department. The warrants were stopped from being served by the district attorney. Whitley and Dylan have never been questioned regarding their involvement in Christian's death. And then it goes into some points of contention or facts as they're listed here. We'll get to those as we go through the story, but I want to back it up a little bit and kind of tell you guys how this thing went down from the start. Over at MississippiToday.org, Christian, who worked offshore on a tugboat called the Magnolia Marine, was found dead in the bathroom of his apartment in Meridian on February 26, 2014, and that's Meridian, Mississippi. He was kneeling on the bathroom floor with his upper body slumped into the bathtub, blood pooling down the drain. Both his girlfriend and one of Christian's friends were at his apartment that day, and that is Whitley and Dylan. Christian's friend Dylan Swearingen called the Meridian police, but investigators who arrived to assess the scene reported they were interrupted by an order from then police chief James Lee to stop investigating and rule the death a suicide. Kind of strange for a police chief to issue an order like that. And I have seen multiple statements from the officers that were showing up. And the assumption of suicide is there pretty much right from the start. The first responding officer does go as far as checking his pulse. He can't see the wound immediately, so he doesn't realize that it is through Christian's head. It literally enters on the right, exits on the left. But after that initial responding officer, everything is being reported as, this officer told me that we're working a suicide, essentially. So let's learn a little bit more about Christian and this case. Only 21 years old when he died, Andreacchio had worked for 3 days on a tugboat in the Mississippi River called the Magnolia Marine. He had been promoted twice during his time on the boat and had a goal of being the youngest employee to become captain. Christian set out for a 30-day hitch on February 22, 2014. However, on the night of the 25th, according to a statement from Cheryl Stanley, a friend and co-worker on the boat, Christian began receiving phone calls from a male telling him he had seen Christian's girlfriend riding around with a dope dealer in Christian's BMW and that he needed to come home. Now, Christian had already been working for a number of years, had this apartment that he was living at with his brother, but, he'd be gone for 30 days at a time working on the boat. But he was making decent money. So he did have a BMW, and I believe he also had a Jeep. And the Jeep was parked at work. BMW was supposed to be at home. And it's kind of interesting because in some of the police statements I'm reading, all of a sudden, certain people are assuming that BMW actually belonged to his girlfriend. And they're actually stating that to the police, that it's her BMW. I haven't seen anything to really point to the conclusion that it was truly hers. And I think it's kind of strange that, especially in Dylan's statement, it basically calls out that it's Whitley's BMW. On top of all this, some of the other information that I've seen through the Facebook, the PI Experience group, has been that Christian might have had a way on his cell phone of seeing where Whitley was and noticed that she didn't go home that night, the night before he basically gets off the boat and goes home. So he's probably suspicious that something's going on with her and possibly another guy. And even her statement, she kind of alludes to having previous trouble when Christian is gone, and she seems to get in some sort of guy trouble or things along those lines. And Cheryl doesn't know it, but the person that's actually calling Christian to tell him about all this is Dylan. He said he was going to go home and get his car, lock his apartment, and make Whitley go back to her grandma's where she was supposed to have been. Then he was supposed to be back at the boat for crew change at 5:30 that evening. So he literally talks to his captain, gets permission to leave the boat, but the boat at this point is down near Louisiana. So he asks his friend Dylan to come pick him up because his car isn't anywhere near him. That's back up in Mississippi. Dylan drives down to pick him up and then take him home. But supposedly Christian's supposed to be meeting back up with the boat later that day by 5:30. So keep that in mind as we're going through all this. Police have never interviewed Stanley. Kind of strange considering she has some pretty good information about what's motivating Christian to head home that day. Christian reached out to his boss to see if he could find a substitute in order to go home for a day, indicating that it was due to a family conflict. He secured a substitute and arranged for a friend to pick him up on shore in St. Rose, Louisiana on the morning of February 26th. Of course, that friend is Dylan Swearingen. Christian's debit card was used at a gas station in Picayune. Sorry, guys, I didn't look that one up. Picayune, Mississippi, possibly, around 9:24 a.m. Christian and Swearingen arrived at Willow Ridge Apartments in Meridian around 11:30 a.m. Goodman, who was living in the apartment, was also there. So just looking at the timeframes we're talking about here, if he had to get close to where he was picked up, this is hours worth of driving. So he probably wouldn't have had a whole lot of time to do whatever he was going to do in terms of possibly kicking Whitley out, and then turn around and start heading back to work. Now, it's possible that maybe he could have been going back to the actual office, which is much closer to his home. I don't have firm information on that, but at least with what we're hearing from his coworker on the boat, she's specifically saying that he was supposed to be back to the boat for a crew change at 5:30 that evening. I don't know if maybe the boat would have gone back further up. Maybe it would have been closer. But one way or another, we know that it's already 11:30 by the time they get to the apartments. He's supposed to be reporting back at 5:30. From then until about 5 p.m. that day, the only two people around Christian were Dylan Swearingen and Whitley Goodman. So at this point, I'm going to cut to some of my notes on this, just to start bringing up some of the issues, in particular with the police statements. The first one we're looking at is the statement of Dylan Swearingen. It's interesting because in Dylan's version of the events, he's saying that Christian actually left the boat without permission, and that security was alerted, and even the sheriffs were alerted to him leaving the boat. No one else supports that version of the events. They've even interviewed like the human resources person that works for the company. All the information that that person has supports the story that Christian told his captain there was some type of family conflict going on. The captain wasn't sure if he believed it, but went ahead and granted permission for Christian to leave the boat. So really interesting that here we have Dylan talking to police. I've already told you about one interesting aspect about all of a sudden calling it Whitley's BMW when it's not her BMW, it's Christian's. And now we're hearing that Christian was basically jumping ship, abandoning his job that he had worked at for years, seemed to really love, and it brought so many good things into his life in terms of him being able to have a nice car like a BMW, affording his own place to live at with his brother. And this, he had a goal of becoming one of the youngest captains in the company. It's really, really strange. I don't know where this aspect is coming from in Dylan's statement. Dylan says Christian was aware that Whitley was seeing someone else. Now, there's another friend that's involved here. His name is Matt Miller. He also gave a statement to police. He says that he was with Whitley the day before. They had gone shooting, I believe, with a cousin of Matt's named Jet. Whitley, interestingly, says that she was shooting that day. Matt says, no, she wasn't. She was too scared to shoot. That's going to be a little important later. But Matt also says that, yeah, he did sleep with Whitley that night. Basically, she came back to his house. Dylan states that the BMW is bought for Whitley. I've already shared that with you, and I really don't understand where that's coming from. Dylan, once they get back to the apartment, he says he's upstairs and that he overhears them arguing. Christian saw that Whitley's phone was at Matt's house overnight. He questioned her about it, and she says she can't remember what happened because she was taking Xanax. Matt also says that they might have been smoking marijuana. Dylan says he stuck his head over the stairs and heard Christian saying over and over, "Do you love me?" And after a few times, he pulled out his gun and cocked it and stuck it to his head and asked again. Then his statement says, after a while, things calmed down and we watched a movie. And it really is that abrupt. I'm not missing a big section in the middle there. He literally goes from the statement about Christian holding a gun to his head, saying, "Do you love me?" to, yeah, after a while, things calmed down and we watched a movie. So here are some of his words, specifically word for word from his statement. I just wanted to give it to you guys that way. I asked him if he wanted me to go get some food and give them a moment alone. He gave me his debit card and said, get some Chick-fil-A and to take all of his money out of his account. That's another strange thing that happens. Dylan is actually caught on surveillance at a bank trying to empty Christian's account. From most reports I've seen, he doesn't know Christian's PIN number, so they're not willing to give him any money out of the account. Other people are saying that it might not be, that it was actually account information that Christian had given to him. So I don't know that it was as simple as, he had the ATM card and he was trying to make a withdrawal. It sounds like he was trying to empty Christian's account. So I don't know if you could really do that just with an ATM card and a PIN number. But basically, they didn't give him anything. I asked him if he was sure, and he replied yes. He also broke her phone in an earlier argument. I told him I would take the phone and see if they could fix it. This is another aspect I just do not understand. I think they're trying to make some excuse why Whitley is using Christian's phone, because Whitley decides to use Christian's phone to try to call Matt several times during this afternoon. And according to information I've heard from Sheila, she can't confirm that there was any repairs done to Whitley's phone or that it was broken or anything like that. I got the food and he provided me with the banking information, but they said he, as the account holder, would have to withdraw the money. I came back and everything was fine. We watched another movie. Now, once again, just the logic in this statement is really just twisting my head all around. Your friend says, hey, go empty my bank account and I want you to have everything that's in it, which already doesn't make sense. You try, you can't do it. You come home and I assume you would tell him, hey, I tried to empty your account. They wouldn't let me. At that point, would the friend say, well, let's go there together and get it taken care of? Or would he say, oh, well, too bad. You know, all that money I was going to give you, forget it. Let's just sit down and watch a movie. I don't know. I noticed they were leaving and I said, where are y'all going? He replied, to take a little ride. I fell asleep and woke up around 2 hours later. Whitley was asleep and Christian was sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette. So already from the statements we have here, we have Dylan talking about watching 2 movies and taking a 2-hour nap. And we know we've got this time window because he's going to wind up calling the police somewhere right before 5 o'clock. And they're only there from 11:30. He's already taking up close to 5 or 6 hours of time. And that's without all these trips that he's supposedly taken to go to Chick-fil-A, to go to the bank. He eventually goes to Best Buy. His time frame is just completely falling apart if you actually take this statement and try to make it fit and make sense. So 2 hours later, I guess he wakes up. Whitley is now asleep. Christian is sitting on the couch smoking a cigarette. He acted normal and I said, I'm about to go to Best Buy and look at some speakers. Do you need anything while I'm out? He replied, no. At an earlier time, after I saw him point the gun to his head, I took the gun from him and placed it behind the curtain because he was acting very aggressive. Now, this statement bothers me in a few ways because I've been in situations where it looked like someone was going to harm themselves before, and you don't just try to hide the item. You literally get rid of the item. And I don't know why Dylan wouldn't have removed the gun, maybe put it in his car or something like that. He hides it behind the curtains. But outside of that, we now know that if forensics takes a look at that gun and they find Dylan's fingerprints on it, he has a built-in excuse here because he's saying that he took the gun from Christian and hid it. As I left, I told him I hid it due to his actions and I gave it back and told him unload it and please don't touch it. As I left, I made it to Best Buy and was talking to the car audio technician. So then he comes back. As I walked in, I noticed he wasn't on the couch and I walked around the apartment calling him and got no answer. I walked up the stairs and noticed the bathroom light was on, so I figured he was taking a shower. I knocked and said, are you all right? Still no answer, so I walked downstairs and walked into a room that Whitley was sleeping in. I told her he didn't answer me and that we need to check on him. She went back to sleep and I walked back upstairs and knocked once more. I asked aloud again, Christian, are you okay? He didn't reply, so I opened the door and I saw Christian laying face down across the tub with blood in it. I yelled, Whitley, Christian is dead. We have to call 911. And she screamed and ran upstairs and began holding him. I then called 911 and directed them to the apartment, and the police arrived and then took control of the scene and asked us to sit in the living room. So that's his statement. And for me, it's kind of interesting because once he actually starts talking about contacting 911, his statement starts really lining up and making sense. It kind of feels like it's flowing right, as opposed to these thoughts that just, I don't know. The beginning of this just, I really have trouble with how it's worded, how all these time frames are supposed to fit together, the actions that are going on around this. And by the way, if a friend was willing to empty out his bank account and give me all the money, wouldn't that be a great time for me to go to Best Buy and check out some speakers? Or if the friend wanted to do that for some reason, hey, let's go to the bank and you can give me all your money and then I'll drop you back off and I'm going to go to Best Buy. There's a lot of strangeness around this. I also don't know if they verified that Best Buy trip, which should have been pretty easy, except for the fact that we don't really have this being investigated as a homicide. So Whitley also gave a statement. One of the most shocking things about her statement is at the top of the statement, which is only a few paragraphs. She's literally talking about the fact that she's considering breaking up with Christian before he comes home. And by the end of it, a few paragraphs later, she's calling him the love of her life. And, she's finding the love of her life dead, basically. She said that the conversation they were having was that Christian did quit his job and that he was frustrated that he couldn't make her or his mom happy. Nothing in terms of her statement really fits what Dylan is saying took place here. It ends literally with the phrase, "I laid down with my dog in our bedroom. Dylan woke me up. I went upstairs and found the love of my life face down, swooshed up in a puddle of blood." When asked, has Christian ever talked about hurting himself? She says, "I don't think so." So that one is really, really tough because we know in Dylan's version of the events that he's kind of threatening her. Supposedly Christian has cocked the gun, is holding it to his head, saying, "Do you love me? Do you love me?" You now have an officer asking, "Hey, has Christian ever talked about hurting himself?" Now, I think logistically you might say, well, that's not really talking about hurting yourself. That's just holding a gun to your head. So it's kind of a lame excuse. I'm pretty sure most reasonable people, if they had just seen that happen hours before, would say, well, he didn't talk about it, but yeah, he did have a gun. He did hold it up to his head earlier today. She doesn't say that. Her answer is simply, "I don't think so." She is asked if she shot Christian. She says, no, she didn't. She says that Dylan found Christian, and then she went in, hugged his waist, and held his hand. Once again, and this is very interesting. Keep in mind that she's saying she hugged his waist. I'm wondering if she's trying to make an excuse why her fingerprints might be in certain places, but this is his girlfriend. I don't think she would really need to make an excuse like that, except there's a bit of an important condition about his waist that we haven't touched on yet. She said that she heard no gunshots, but she admits to being on Xanax. So maybe she missed the gunshots. Just to give you guys some idea of what is going on here, I want to show you the layout. So this is the layout of the actual bathroom. It's been drawn out. You've got the tub here on the right. A toilet is right next to the tub. And then you have the vanity over here. And then you have the doorway here. Now, essentially kind of where this blue block is, this is about where Christian's body is. If you can imagine, his head is laying over in the tub right here. His chest is here. Interestingly, his knees are not right up against the tub. At least in the photos I've seen, they're almost a full foot back from the tub. But just imagine that his knees are touching somewhere around here and that his legs are extending out from there. His feet are not completely crossed, but they are kind of crossed in a certain way. One other interesting aspect, as noted here, his boots are actually in the path of the door. The way the door's open, they would have hit his feet. So something's already kind of strange just about the positioning with his body. What's more strange than all that is back over here is an electrical plate on this wall. And there is a bullet hole, or what appears to be a bullet hole, in that electrical plate. So let me bring up an image for you guys real quick on that so you can see it for yourselves. And you tell me, do you think this is a bullet hole? Now, assuming the story that we're supposed to believe about him ending his own life in the bathtub, he is right-handed, and the bullet does enter on the right side, right temple, and basically leaves on the left side. No significant deviation up or down, a little bit forward and back, but not a whole lot. But as you can imagine, this bullet hole, according to the map that I just showed you, is directly behind him. It is not in line anywhere with the path that the bullet should have traveled if he is leaning over in front of the bathtub. And I have to tell you guys something else that has really bothered me about this case since I started learning about it. The mentality of doing something like this to yourself, but being worried about leaving a mess. Like, I don't get that. I don't get that he was so emotionally distraught about his relationship and possibly whatever else is going on, quitting his job. Let's assume everything they're saying is right. He can't make his mom happy, can't make his girlfriend happy. He just quit his job. So he goes into his bathroom, takes a bottle of beer and a cup from Chick-fil-A. The cup from Chick-fil-A is actually found in the bathtub in the blood. The bottle of beer is found on the counter. Some of us are saying that might mean that there was actually two people in this bathroom at some point. Why do we have these two things in there? But brings his gun into the bathroom, then decides he's going to end his own life, but he doesn't want to really leave a mess behind for the woman that has caused him a lot of this grief that is making him want to leave his life. He's going to worry about doing this in the bathtub. I don't know. Just the logic of it doesn't make a lot of sense. Not to say that people are always thinking very logically if they're in that mindset, but I just don't get that. And then the bullet hole, he's here. The path supposedly traveled this way, but somehow there's a bullet hole back over here. Oh, and by the way, other people have made statements that they saw blood spatter outside of the bathroom on the hallway walls. So how could that be? The bullet and the ejected cartridge found in the tub. So if I take you guys back to that photo that I showed you of the bullet hole, one of the things I'm wondering about is if someone used some item to pry the bullet out of here. Because you could see there's some breakage that's going on in the drywall down here, and it's going the wrong direction. So I'm wondering if an item was used to try to remove the bullet from there. Another interesting aspect is in the sink. We can see there's some debris. It sure looks like drywall to me that has been photographed in the sink as well. So a lot of strange stuff going on with this case. Let me get back to my notes. I've got a little more to share with you guys about this. I wanted to just make sure to give you guys all the important points before we get to the video next week. So other interesting items. Christian, who is right-handed, shoots himself in his right temple. How does the pistol end up between his left leg and the outside of the tub? That is one of the strangest conditions of this. So imagine his body's pressed up against the tub. He supposedly used his right hand to shoot himself through the right side of his head. Somehow the pistol winds up on the opposite side of his body, between his body and the tub that he's supposedly already leaning forward in. And conveniently, the handle of the pistol is facing outward of where his thigh is, essentially. It looks like someone could have just walked in there, taken the pistol, and kind of shoved it between his thigh and the wall of the tub. Another important consideration, the gun was found in an uncocked position, and this is a .45 Kimber semi-automatic 1911. So basically, once you load that clip and you take your first shot, it automatically cocks. It automatically gets ready to shoot again. But for some reason, this gun is found uncocked when it's found between his leg and the tub, which most people say that just cannot happen. That effectively proves that someone has manipulated the gun before it got there. Also, the coroner did not rule this as a suicide. They have homicide, suicide. The coroner actually ruled it as undetermined, which is just another interesting point in all this. Another question, why did forensic experts hired by the Andreacchio family conclude that the blood spatter in the bathroom and the location of a bullet hole near the electrical outlet above the sink and behind Christian did not line up with what would have happened if he shot himself while kneeling over the tub? I don't know how to explain that any better to you guys. I have a bathroom. Many of us probably have bathrooms that are laid out that way. Mine is just a mirror image of that layout. I've thought about it every which way. Could he have turned his head like this? Could he have turned his head like that? I don't know how that bullet gets in that location and he winds up where he is, and then the gun winds up where it is. It doesn't make a whole lot of sense. Now, there was gunshot residue tests done on Whitley, on Dylan, and on Christian. Gunshot residue test on Whitley and Dylan's hands both come back positive. Now, if you remember, Whitley does say that she was out shooting guns the previous day with Matt. Matt says she was there, but she wasn't shooting guns. I have heard of GSR transfer happening if you're just in an area where guns are being shot, so that's one possibility. Interestingly, the gunshot residue test for Christian shows that on his right hand, it's in the palm of his right hand, and there's none found on the back of his hand. That does not make a lot of sense if he fired that weapon, because his palm is essentially wrapped on the grip. There shouldn't be any gunshot residue that is found on his palm. It should all be found on the back or on the top of his hand, and none is actually found there. Some more information. This is from the California DOJ website. The absence of gunshot residue may occur for the following reasons: if the subject did not discharge a firearm, if the subject may have discharged a firearm but no GSR particles were deposited on the sampled area, or if the GSR particles were removed by washing, wiping, or other activity before the samples were collected. I saw the GSR info sheets, and they kind of ask all that when they're doing the test. Dylan and Whitley did not say that they washed their hands. They said they didn't wash their hands. But both of them wind up with GSR. And something interesting here about her excuse about shooting the previous day. This is from Wikipedia. GSR is the consistency of flour and typically only stays on the hands of a living person for 4 to 6 hours. Wiping the hands on anything, even putting them in and out of pockets, can transfer GSR off the hands. We know that she at least slept at Matt's house the night before. We know she was sleeping during this day. Isn't it possible that her hands are going to be wiping up on blankets or on pillows or just on the couch that she's sleeping on? I think it's pretty interesting that GSR is still found on her. This is coming up on close to at least 20 hours after she was supposedly out shooting with these friends. Now, Whitley's friend Matt also came up with some more information. Whitley says that she was sleeping. She never heard the fatal gunshot, but Matt says she originally told him that she did hear it, and that there have been discrepancies about, did she find Christian or did Dylan find Christian first? Basically, Matt has heard so many different stories from her, he doesn't know what to believe anymore. Christian's family says the crime scene was not processed completely. The investigation lasted approximately 45 minutes. They went there after and found a bloody shirt hidden behind the toilet and a knife with blood on it. That was handed over to police, and now the family claims the whereabouts of those items are unknown. Also worth pointing out, I've seen pictures of the actual bullet, and there is a substance in the tip of it. I don't know if it's actually been tested, but just by eyeballing it, it does appear to at least be consistent with drywall. And there is some blood on one side of the bullet, but like I mentioned, the bullet was found in the bathtub full of blood. I've seen a picture of that too, and it's one of those cases where could the bullet have been kind of tossed in? The top of it is all clean, and basically just the bottom portion that was in the blood is red. So I don't know. I don't know for certain. I'm just telling you guys, I have a strange feeling about the photo I've seen of it. According to the attorney, Dylan went to the bank and tried to pull out all Christian's money at least 4 hours before he called 911 to report the supposed suicide. Police questioned him, and he said Christian wanted him to have all his money. It's just a really strange part to this story I don't get. Also, the responding officer noted that the blood looked very dark and seemed to think that it was already coagulating. So I'm looking forward to the PI experience to see if we might have an expert that can speak to that and say, is this a decent indicator that the death was actually prior, like much prior to the phone call? One of the things we're working with as a theory is that whatever happened to Christian happened probably more around the noon time, before Dylan would have gone out and tried to take all his money out of his account. So I'd be very curious to see if we have some experts that can talk about that. On the 911 call, Dylan is the one that actually stated that he saw blood spatter on the stairs outside the bathroom. So that's another important fact. And why did police never look into the fact that Christian's vehicle was moved in his work parking lot on Vicksburg the day he died in Meridian? That's a whole other aspect to this case that we're just getting into. I don't know a lot about it, except that supposedly Christian kept a lockbox in his Jeep, and in that lockbox was a gun and a ton of cash. And I believe those items are missing. So what has happened with this case? After all this is an article from Mississippi Today, May 3rd, 2017. The family of Christian Andreacchio has filed a wrongful death lawsuit against the two individuals who were with him the day he was found dead in his Meridian apartment. Obviously, that lawsuit involves Whitley and Dylan. So the captain that supposedly said to call this a suicide and wrap this thing up, he eventually gets fired for creating a hostile work environment. And another captain is brought in, and at some point he decides he's going to reopen the case. So they do actually start investigating it, but you're now talking months after the fact. They do eventually take it to a grand jury. This is an update from Meridian Star from December 2017. A Lauderdale County grand jury has chosen not to indict two individuals in the 2014 death of 21-year-old Christian Andreacchio. Ray Andreacchio, Christian's mother, said she was not surprised by the outcome, but questioned how the Attorney General's office handled the case. She said to her knowledge, no one ever contacted the expert witnesses the family had hired to investigate the forensic evidence and other information regarding the case. She also said no one who worked on a Mississippi River towboat with Christian and had knowledge of the events leading up to his death was contacted. It's all based on what information they give to the grand jury. So when you give no contradicting information because you haven't spoke to anyone that would contradict anything, then of course it's going to be a suicide, she said. We were kind of prepared for it. The family decided not to pursue a civil suit filed earlier this year against Goodman and Swearingen, but Andreacchio said she and family members will continue to search for answers. We just continue to try to find someone who will help us, she said. And I'm really thankful that she found Sheila. I am really thankful that Sheila has decided to feature this case for the next PI experience. And we've got a bunch of very good minds working on this. We've got the experts that Sheila has pulled in, but we also just have the people that are coming to the PI experience. She's given them access to tons of information that they can review about this case. People are asking some really good questions about very specific aspects of this case. And that's what we're looking to capture with whatever show we produce for next week on Danielle's channel. You're going to get to see people that have gone through the experiences tell us about what that's like and raise their questions, maybe bring their theories, and perhaps someone in that group is going to bring up the key piece of information that can move this case forward. If you happen to have information about this case, I've got contact information in the details down below for Sheila directly, because at this point, I don't believe law enforcement's even working this case anymore. Once the grand jury kicked it out, I think the police chief basically said, we've done all we can with it. There's really nothing else we can do. So any tips or information need to go to Sheila. Contact information for her is in the description box below. Before we end today's episode, I want to let you guys know about a possible bright spot in this whole case. This is a website called magnoliasun.com, and that's sun as in S-O-N. My name is Ray Andreacchio. I am the founder of Magnolia Sun, but most importantly, I am the mother of a wonderful young man named Christian Shane Andreacchio. As I struggled with losing Christian, I also struggled for a way to hold on to Christian. Talking to his brother and sister and watching as our family attempted to acclimate to the loss of one of its members, I realized for the first time that our family revolved around Christian's larger-than-life personality. His smile, his sense of adventure, his total disregard for norms, his need to hug and kiss and show physical affection so unlike most of his family, his joy in harassing and challenging his mother to leave her comfort zone. The idea of starting a nonprofit organization was the obvious choice to keep not only Christian's memory, but his spirit of living alive. I wanted to do something that would make him proud and get a smile out of him. Christian had grown up giving his outgrown clothes and shoes to kids who were not as fortunate as he. After much deliberating, a name was formed, Magnolia Sun. Magnolia representing the company who gave him a chance at 18 years old with no experience and helped shape him into a, quote, great boss. The company that gave him not a posse, but a crew, literally a boatload of friends who spent more time with him than his family the last 2.5 years of his life. We added Sun to the end of the name to honor Christian's role in our family. And so this project, Magnolia Sun, was created with a combination of Christian's generosity of spirit, his love of life, and his recognition of others' needs. We have very large boots to fill. The mission statement for Magnolia Sun is to provide appropriate footwear and clothing for children in need. with emphasis on children placed in state custody, DHS, in order to meet their basic needs and facilitate improving their self-esteem. So on behalf of my amazing supporters via PayPal and Patreon, we have made a donation to Magnolia Sun earlier today. We can see the thank you page here from Ray. And I just want to tell you guys, thank you so much for being there and helping me do things like this. And I'm extremely proud to be helping Sheila with this. I'm very proud to be working with Danielle in terms of giving attendees a different way to review the information. I went to last year's PI experience and I got all the information really late, and I realized there was so much of it I wasn't going to be able to review it all. So that's why we were trying to address that by doing our videos that are kind of like the Cliff's Notes version of all the information. And it's been a wonderful experience. The group has been really appreciative of our work, and we're appreciative of that group, of all these people that are working together to try to figure out what's going on with this case and can we move it forward. Before I end today's video, I want to give a special thank you to a donation that came in through PayPal. That is from Melissa Campbell. Thank you so much, Melissa. If you would like to donate to the channel, you can do that at www.lordenarts.com. You can set up your Patreon there. You can set up PayPal, make a one-time, make a monthly donation, or buy some merch, buy the audiobook. All that stuff helps support the channel and helps keep me here doing what I love doing, trying to help others that really need us. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll see you back here on Monday with a brand new episode of Case Cracked on the Lorden Arts channel.